Most of the college football playoff attention concerning the SEC surrounds Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. But you know what? Somebody could spoil everything. They've got a clear shot to the SEC championship game in Atlanta, and they're at home in Death Valley this weekend. LSU, Bama. We got Matt Muscone on the line from After Further Review. Catch him on ESPN Radio in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Alexandria as well. Matt, it's been a while. How you doing?
Mark, I'm doing great, man. It's a fun week when LSU and Bama is meaningful, and this one is certainly meaningful.
Absolutely. So let's kind of track how we got here because in week one, that Florida State game was fun to watch unless you had rooting interest on the LSU side because all sorts of gaffes on offense and special teams, of course, were the headliners. How much has this team progressed since what we saw on national TV that opening night?
Their progression is illustrated by the fact that this game in November is meaningful because if they were playing that way throughout this season, I'd suggest they might have one conference win right now. But instead they're 6-2, they're 4-1 in the league. I think, Mark, it took a long time. I shouldn't say a long time. I've been asked a lot, when did the light switch happen? I don't think it was a light switch. It's been a progression of Brian Kelly and this coaching staff getting to know their players and what they can do. You got to keep in mind, boy, this is a transfer-heavy team. When they played that bowl game last year, there were 39 scholarship players available for that game. So Brian Kelly brought in 15 mid-year enrollees. They hit the transfer portal hard. Your entire secondary, you're starting transfers. Starting to transfer quarterback who had to get timing with new receivers, cadence with an offensive line. You replaced all 5 starters on the offensive line. They've used 6 different line combinations in 8 games. So it's been a progress of Brian Kelly and his staff learning who they can trust, who can do what, and putting them in the best position. And I think you're starting to see those results manifest with the wins at Florida and Ole Miss, in particular on offense.
You talk about somebody that Jaden Daniels can trust, and early in the season, it didn't look like anyone, regardless of how much talent was in the wide receiver room. And there were some questions floating around based on Kayshon Boutte at the time, Booty now, as he's corrected us in regards to, how much he was engaged in the process and really wanted to be on the field and play. And things have just changed considerably in 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know that Kayshon was ever disengaged. I know that was sort of a narrative, probably started by Brian Kelly the day he was hired. And, he was asked about Kayshon. He said, I know his name, basically. And they were working toward, look, it was a big-time culture change, Mark. I mean, last year when LSU played UCLA in the opener out in the Rose Bowl, the day of the game, you had starters riding scooters around Santa Monica Boulevard a few hours before the game. It was kind of a lawless culture with Ed Ogeron. And Brian Kelly is a 180. And so for a lot of guys, and I put Kayshon on that number, it wasn't that he's a bad guy or has a bad attitude or anything like that. I was just getting used to a new coach and new expectations. When he was hurt at the time, he didn't really start participating. He missed all spring. He didn't participate until fall camp. So I don't know. Kayshon's a good guy. He's just quiet. And I don't think he was ever disengaged. Just think the offense wasn't really featuring him, which was perplexing. But boy, they've really started, all those receivers have really started to get involved. And, I think a big part of that is not so much receiver play as it is Jaden Daniels being willing to trust his receivers. Mark, early in the season, man, Jaden was so hesitant to make any kind of a mistake. He didn't want to put the ball in harm's way. He didn't want to turn the ball over, which is good. But the flip side of it is you're also not taking chances. You're not letting your playmakers make plays. And, boy, he has started to throw those 50-50 balls, and his receivers are rewarding him. That's probably the primary reason why you've started to see this offense roll the past few weeks.
Yeah, and the contrast, I just don't want to focus on this Florida State game because I've seen Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and the Florida game since. But the other thing about Jaden Daniels in that opener that struck me was because of injuries and suspensions, he couldn't turn around and hand the ball off to anybody. Like, he was the running game and the passing game at that point in the season. And now we've had three backs emerge, and people on the outside, certainly, this LSU personnel, people on the outside only knew of John Emery at the time, but they've had a few other guys emerge.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the season, Jaden Daniels was LSU's leading rusher out of necessity. And a lot of it wasn't design runs. I mean, it was like jailbreak, you just better scramble and make something happen. I mean, Mark, the first play of the season, very first play of the season, that Florida State game, they dropped back to pass. Daniels was just flooded with pressure. He rolled right or left and escaped for a 25-yard run. And that was indicative of, some of the best plays the offense had early in the season were just Jaden Daniels scramble drills. But a couple of things have happened. One, the offensive line is solidified. They've got two true freshmen starting at tackle, and they are special players, man. Those are Sunday guys. They're young. They're true freshmen, which is unenviable, especially this week. But, boy, they've won a lot more than they've lost. Charles Turner has really established himself as the starting center. They've gone from an offensive line that was a complete and total liability to a unit that's pretty good. I'm not going to tell you they're dominant, but they're pretty good. And that's also allowed the running game to get going in a traditional sense. So you mentioned John Emery, who is former 5-star. Everyone's just sort of waited for John to have that big breakout. And you see flashes, but injuries and a year-long suspension have really derailed his career a little bit here. But Armani Goodwin is explosive. Man, he is a hard, physical, explosive runner. And Josh Williams is a former walk-on who, look, Mark, nobody's going to – when the draft rolls around, nobody's going to see Josh Williams' names in anybody's scouting draft book, okay? He's short. He's not very fast. But he's a guy that if you need a yard, he's going to get you two. He's low to the ground. He'll find seams. He's a tough runner. He protects the football, and he can block. So – They have found guys that they like and guys they can trust within this offense. And there's spots, don't get it twisted. There are spots where LSU looks like LSU. The offense have produced Odell and Jarvis and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. They got the next crop of those dudes at receiver right now. And they got some really, really good talent that defensive front seven too. But there are spots on this team where the attrition has hurt them and where they are vulnerable. And, it'll be interesting to see if Bama's able to exploit that the way Tennessee was.
And Goodwin was a recruiting win against Bama, correct?
Oh, man, you're going back. I think it was maybe Auburn. I could be wrong about that, Mark. Okay. I think it might have been Auburn.
So we saw the college football playoff rankings released on Tuesday. And I don't know if there's been any more criticism thrown at any other team as much as LSU sitting at 10. And what I laugh at is when I have my call-in show and people contact me about, oh, this is an outrageous ranking because they got 2 losses and so forth and so on. You know where I have them ranked, Matt? 8. I'm a big schedule guy and opponents guy, and I think they have quality wins against teams that have losses only because of their quality schedules. And this team just keeps getting better and better, and I think they're truly that good.
Man, I've been asked a lot this week about that ranking. And Mark, I'm going to give you an answer that you're not going to like. I just don't care. And I know in this business we're supposed to have opinions, and when you say I don't care, it disengages the audience. So I just don't care. Mark, it is November. It is November the 3rd as you and I sit here and talk. There are 4 more weeks of football and then a championship weekend as well. I don't care one little bit where LSU or anybody is ranked today. TCU fans are melting because of their lack of respect. I got a great idea. Go 13-0 and you'll be in the playoffs. Who cares where you're ranked today? You know what's going to happen Tuesday? Either Georgia or Tennessee is going to have a loss, and the team that loses is not going to be in the top 4 next week. And you know what? It won't matter, because if they go win the rest of their games, and there's going to be a path to potentially be in the playoff. We're going to see Michigan and Ohio State play. So if you're a Michigan fan and you're on the outside right now and you're ticked off, who cares? The only reason these rankings right now exist is to get people like me to scream. That's it. It's a TV show for ESPN and an opportunity to create conversation. But there is no merit, value at all whatsoever behind these rankings on November the 3rd. So I know that's not the answer you want. I don't care if LSU was not ranked at all. It's wholly irrelevant. Because if LSU goes and loses to Bama this week, they're out of it anyway. So who cares? If they beat Bama and go win the SEC championship game, now we got a conversation. Because then you'd be talking about a 2-loss LSU team who had beaten Bama and the East champ, either undefeated Tennessee or Georgia. And now we got a conversation. But, man, people who are melting over these rankings right now. It's like, what? Mark, you remember the first year of the playoff, 2014?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the very first rankings? The very first ones that ever came out?
Yeah, the state of Mississippi was, on top of the world.
3 schools from the SEC West. 3 schools from one division. College football melted. None of them made the playoff. Who cares? It just doesn't matter right now. Like that same year in 2014, TCU was ranked 2nd going into the final weekend. They beat Iowa State 55-3 and dropped out of the rankings. I mean, the committee's going to do whatever they want to do, and who cares what it is right now? Who cares what it is the second to last week? You just go play the games. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Maybe that was entertaining. Maybe the passion was good, but it's not the answer anybody wanted to hear.
I want the answer that you want to deliver. That's all I want. That's all I want is the truth. Now, see, I'm not ready to jump off a bridge, so I'm not one of those in any such way because there's a lot of football left to be played. And like you, the committee's going to justify their decision, and they can go a number of different paths. Oh, well, conference championships or best resume or best this or that or the eyeball test, or we just select the best. The one that they've come up with in the last 3 or 4 years was we just select the 4 best teams, which can pretty much cover any decision that they make. But I will say this. Where they ranked TCU tells us something about the value that they place in TCU. So there is going to be a more difficult path for TCU. They are most likely going to have to go undefeated where other teams won't. And then number 2, I think it's going to tell us a lot how much they drop the Tennessee-Georgia loser.
Yeah, I don't care. It's not going to matter at all. If the TCU goes undefeated, they're going to make the playoff. People have said, well, what if it was Oklahoma or Texas right now? Where would they be in the top 4? Mark, who would you take out right now if you were going to put Texas or Oklahoma in?
No one.
Bingo. So it don't matter at all. Brands, it does not matter right
now. Okay. I'm there with you to an extent.
It doesn't matter. Is there a path? The only path for a 1-loss Big 12 champion to make the playoff is total chaos if there are no undefeated teams. Because a 1-loss SEC team is going to get in over any 1-loss Big 12 team. Period. So it just doesn't matter. Go undefeated, TCU. Go undefeated, you'll be in. I promise. They put Cincinnati in last year. Go undefeated, you'll be in.
Matt Moscona. After further review, good stuff. Always enjoy it. Defense. Is this LSU defense? Is this close to, I don't want to say vintage. That's really high. But, man, Harold Perkins obviously is the guy that jumps off the page, but a ton of guys that are just freakishly athletic.
Hey, when we talk about LSU defense, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Defensive backs all time, of course.
DBU. This one isn't that, and that's the big difference. You're very right about the front 7. Man, that looks like LSU. The defensive front 7, Harold Perkins is a true freshman, but my goodness, there's a reason he was a top 10 player in the country. He is better as a linebacker right now as a freshman than Devin White was as a freshman. I'm not saying he'll be a better prospect in time. I don't know, but Devin White didn't come in as a polished linebacker. Harold Perkins is a 3-down linebacker. I mean, he has beaten out seniors to be on the field right now. B.J. Ojolari in that jack position is fantastic. The defensive coordinator is Matt House, and a lot of people may not remember that name, but he was the defensive coordinator at Kentucky Remember the year they had Josh Allen? He had like 21 sacks, whatever, 2019 or 18, whatever year that was.
Yep.
He's basically got BJ Ojulari playing that role, and he's a really, really special athlete. And they've got a lot of talent along that defensive front, man. The linebackers are fast and athletic, and they can cover sideline to sideline, which is why I think they might give Bryce Young some trouble. I think they can contain Bryce Young. I'm not saying they're going to shut him down or anything like that, but I think they can contain Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs from beating them on the ground. The problem that LSU is going to have is the problem they had against Tennessee and the problem they have against everybody who has good receivers. They can't cover. There is no Derek Stingley. There is no look. Elias Ricks is playing for the guys in Crimson this weekend. The former 5-star number one cornerback in the country, started at LSU for 2 years. He's now starting at Bama. Dwight McGlothern's at Arkansas. Derek Stingley and Cordell Flotter in the NFL. And when you had that much turnover on this team, they had to go hit the transfer portal hard, Mark. So they're going to start Jark Bernard-Converse, who's a transfer from Oklahoma State. And they're starting Colby Richardson, who's a transfer from McNeese. I mean, it looks different back there. It's not. They'll get it back, to the level it was, but that's where they're vulnerable, man. If for years and years and years, LSU could always say, I don't care who your receivers are, I'm going to put my guy on an island, and I like my guy. If it was Patrick Peterson against Julio Jones, if it was Tre'Davious White or Dante Jackson or Christian Fulton or Derek Stingley or whoever. I mean, they've always had those guys, and they don't have those guys this year. So if Bama really, really hurts LSU, that's how they're going to do it. It's going to be Jermaine Burton. It's going to be those receivers finding space in that secondary and really hurting LSU. But that is kind of a big question, though, isn't it, Mark? Like, I don't know if you agree with me, but those Alabama receivers this year don't look like Ruggs and Judy and Waddle and Smith and Amari Cooper or Julio Jones or Ridley. I mean, it doesn't look like those guys this year. So I think that's the giant question in this ballgame.
So it looks like both teams have the same problem because, Bama secondary doesn't look like a Bama secondary.
I'm a little – so they were certainly torched by Tennessee, but I think everybody's going to get torched by Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee just looks like they're going to be able to move the ball on anybody. They got good receivers. They have a dynamic quarterback who I think should win the Heisman Trophy. They're just really, really good. Elias Ricks is a true number one lockdown corner. And I'll tell you, Mark, I talked – well, he had two surgeries on the same shoulder. And getting his body back physically was a big part of why he didn't play a ton in the first half of the year. The fact that he's starting again tells you he's ready to roll, and he's a big problem. But the thing for LSU though, Mark, is they got, even if Elias Ricks locks down one receiver, it don't matter. I mean, LSU's got 6 more they'll roll through that can all win one-on-ones against your best. So a lot of people laugh when I say it, Mark, but man, I think like LSU has the deepest receiver room in the SEC. Total respect to Tennessee with those guys, the three-headed monster at the top with Tillman and McCoy and Hyatt. LSU's got 7 of them that are all going to be NFL draft picks. And if you try to take away one, there's another one ready to hurt you. So, I'm curious to see, if LSU can give Jaden Daniels time to throw, and if those LSU wide receivers can go win their matchups. If they can, LSU can move the ball. Mark, I'll tell you this much, man. This ain't gonna be 10-0. It ain't gonna be 9-6 in overtime. Right. It's not gonna be one of those types of LSU Bama games. Like both teams are going to move the ball and score points in this game.
Yes. No score at halftime. What was that, about 5 years ago? Yeah.
That was 2016. Was the 10-0 game in Tiger Stadium. Yeah.
Last question, Matt. Brian Kelly, do you have any different thoughts about him? Does the LSU fan base have different thoughts about? I'm sure after Florida State, half the fan base was like, "We knew this wasn't the guy. Get him out of here."
There was that portion of the fan base, of course. But I think, I think you and I talked after. Maybe that was the last time I was on the show, Mark, was maybe after Brian Kelly got hired. And, the point that I've made pretty consistently, people always talk about fit, and I always point out, man, look, the 3 most successful coaches in the history of LSU athletics, Skip Ertman, who's the greatest college baseball coach ever, was a Jewish guy from Miami. And for those that don't know, Louisiana is just a heavily saturated Catholic area because of its French and Spanish roots. Dale Brown, when he retired, was the second winningest coach in SEC history behind only Adolph Rupp from Minot, North Dakota. And Nick Saban, who was from West Virginia, spent his whole career in the Midwest. None of them knew how to spell etouffee or could cook a roux. And it just doesn't matter. You just have to win here. And Brian Kelly's won everywhere. So that's all he has to do, really, is he's got to win, and he'll have every resource he needs. The interesting thing, as you were starting, I thought it was the direction you were going, was, yes, my thoughts on Brian Kelly and if perceptions change. It kind of has. And I don't know if you knew him well or know him well, but I had never met Brian Kelly or knew anything other than, well, I just see him on TV as the coach of Notre Dame, right? But I kind of had the idea that he was this sort of red-faced, Irish, screaming guy, kind of cold, Northeast, standoffish. Sure. He is the complete opposite of that. He is actually pretty warm and engaging and funny and affable and accommodating. He's been honestly a pleasure to cover. I mean, with any football thought aside, obviously we could judge his performance on the field, but just Brian Kelly, the person, the man, has been actually much different than I thought he would be, whatever perception I had. So look, Mark, let them hit a 3-game skid and see if that changes. Maybe it does, but sure. Maybe he felt coming in the season like he had some house money because the expectations were low, and they've exceeded them. So maybe that's keeping him loose. But he has done really well here, man. In any way you would expect a coach making this transition to do so, he's done it.
Matt, appreciate you stopping by. And I want to tell anyone that's watching that's not familiar with Matt's work. And I'm not going to say that I'm checking in with you every day. And I would love to take in your content every day. It's just, you know what the deal is. I'm busy. You're busy. You're flying all over the place. There's a million different content producers out there. And I'm focused on my own thing. But I got to tell you, anytime I check out what Matt's doing, whether that's, you pop up on Instagram and I check out a clip or whatever, I'm either busting up laughing because that's your take for the day, or it makes me think. It's like really insightful. I'm like, yeah, that's really good. And I got to say, there's been a handful of times where it was like, okay, something maybe serious happened in that area of the country, or with you personally, or something, hit you hard and you expressed it in such a way. I got to say, wow, that was moving. So really good stuff. I can always count on you to, deliver whatever that narrative is. It's going to hit the emotions and it's going to make you think, and it's really good stuff.
Man, I appreciate it, Mark. That's very kind. You've been nice enough to ask me to come on here for a lot of years, man. So I always appreciate the conversation. And sorry I yelled about the rankings.
No, that's what I want. I just think that they set us up for something. They're thinking, they're playing chess there with the committee, or at least they should be, to protect themselves to a certain extent. And I think they are. So they're telling us something with those rankings. But sure, they've all got to win. You just got to win and take care of business, and you should be okay. No question about that. Matt, for those people that are outside the area, what's the best way to find you and to find your work?
Yeah, I would say if you can spell my name, you can find me on the internet. I do afternoon drive all over Louisiana on ESPN affiliates, but man, I've got podcasts and vlogs and all kind of stuff everywhere. So find me on Twitter. You'll find links to everything I do.
All right. The Twitter handle's right there on the banner. It's been there the whole time. So there we go, folks. Matt, thanks so much for stopping by. Enjoy the game this weekend.
My pleasure.